Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by the accuracy of his answers to oral question number 1 in the House yesterday? If not, in what respect were his answers inaccurate?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, and in particular I stand by my statement that the distribution of income in New Zealand is more even now than at any time under the previous Labour government. The assertion is based on actual data, which is the very latest data available, and on very rigorous analysis of that data, something I know that is a foreign concept to the Labour Party.
Supplementary. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, why did the Prime Minister claim that the gap in incomes had widened under Labour when the report that he quoted says precisely the opposite?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, because the member is wrong. If one looks at the report and takes, for instance, the 80-20 ratio as a measure, the report shows that inequality increased from 1998 to 2001 and increased again from 2001 to 2004.
The point of order has been called. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to table page 2 of the Household Incomes Report 2011, which says that inequality declined from 2001 to 2010, precisely
order.
the opposite
Leave is
of what
sought
the Prime
to table
Minister
that
claimed.
document. Is there any objection? There is no objection. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, did the report that he quoted from yesterday attribute the decline in inequality to Labour's Working for Families package, which he described as quote-unquote communism by stealth? And does he regret that comment, given that the report's finding was that Working for Families had halved child poverty rates for those in working families?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no, I do not regret those comments, and there were a number of factors. And the reason for that was because the original design of Working for Families actually showed a situation where people could lose over 100% of any income they earn. If that's not communism by spell, I don't know what is. But, Mr Speaker, there were a number of factors in the report that showed why inequality changed.
Supplementary question.
Chris Tremain.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. What was the distributional effect of Budget 2010 tax package?
The Right Honourable Prime
Good
Minister.
question, Mr Speaker. The Treasury did some analysis of the distributional effects of the whole tax package, including the changes to property tax rules and the closing of loopholes around Working for Families and other income assistance. The analysis was again based on actual data from the Household Economic Survey. It showed that the impact of the whole tax package was effectively distributionally neutral. In other words, it had almost the same impact on different household income groups. That is because while higher income earners received larger income tax reductions, they also bore most of the impact of the tax-based broadening measures. In the end, the two of these cancelled each other out. And, Mr Speaker, if members are interested, they should go to the Treasury analysis. We don't make things up. We actually have the Treasury do the work. And here it shows the effective distribution of those full tax package.
The Honourable Leader of the
Question,
Opposition.
Mr Speaker. When he claimed credit for the reduction of inequality in New Zealand yesterday, was he aware that the figures that he was relying on in the Household Income Survey contained all of Labour's progressive income tax cuts in 2008, but none of the highly regressive tax changes of 2010 that gave him as Prime Minister over $1,000 a week, but somebody on the medium wage in my electorate just $13.
The Right Honourable Prime
Mr
Minister.
Speaker, on so many fronts the member is factually incorrect, but it would be useful if he listened to the last answer, which shows the Treasury analysis says the entire tax package was effectively distributionally neutral.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, with the increase over the last year in the wealth of the top 150 rich individuals in New Zealand by 20% or $7 billion, and the credible reports from a whole range of social agencies indicating a very steep increase in people relying on food packages, has the gap between rich and poor widened or narrowed in New Zealand in the last year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's impossible to know that at this point, but we'll know next year when MSD produce their report. But if Treasury's analysis is correct, then on terms of the income tax package, it will be effectively distributionally neutral. There are, as the member probably knows if he's looked at the report, many factors that actually go into it. At this stage, that would be far too early to tell at this point.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Why, according to the Household Incomes report, is wealth more concentrated in a few hands in New Zealand, with 10% possessing 50% of the country's wealth, more than in the United Kingdom or in Australia? And is it the case that the richest benefit from the absence of a capital gains tax in this country, but not in those other two countries?
Again, Mr Speaker, it would be useful if the member read out what was actually in the report, so I'll quote it for him. It says, New Zealand's wealth inequality is not unusual for OECD countries. In fact, it's lower, for example, no it's not, it's lower, for example, than Sweden, where the top decile holds 58%.
Point of order, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Point of order. Can I seek leave of the House to table the section of the Household Income Survey that shows that 10%, the top 10% in New Zealand owns 50% of the wealth, but in Australia and the United Kingdom it's only 45% in each case.
Leavers sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection.
Supplement.
Dr Russel Norman. Order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree that when we have a significant proportion of children in our country living in poverty who struggle to get food and shoes to go to school, that spending money to get those kids out of poverty shouldn't be seen as a cost but should be seen as a social investment?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, and that's why the government spends an awful lot of money in that area.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, are the statistics produced by Statistics New Zealand yesterday that show that wages and salaries have gone up by 1.9% when inflation is running at 5.3% accurate?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the member is mixing a number of different factors. He's looking at the labour cost index, which, as I said yesterday, and I'm happy to take the member through it again, the labour cost index is a static like-for-like comparison. It does not look at all of the factors that go into wages. If one looks at all of those factors, that's the quarterly employment survey. In 2001, the then Labour government changed the law to tell every pensioner in New Zealand.
Point of order, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order. Point of order has been called.
Mr Speaker, the question, as you'll recall, was very straightforward. Were the figures produced by Statistics New Zealand yesterday accurate? There is a clear answer to that. I don't need a prolonged explanation that doesn't address the question.
Order, and I'm on my feet. And there will be no comments from anyone. The House is too noisy altogether today. The Minister cannot expect, the member cannot expect the Prime Minister to answer the question exactly the way he wants it. The Prime Minister was giving a very detailed answer to the question that he was not attacking anyone politically. It was, he was giving informative information for the House. And I believe that he was not departing from the standing orders at all. I invite the Prime Minister to finish his answer.
Just to recap that point, Statistics New Zealand themselves show that the quarterly employment survey is the best indicator for what is taking place in terms of wage growth. And Mr Speaker, if one looks at that, that was the assumption adopted by Labour when they changed the law in 2001 to say that would be the basis under which New Zealand super would be based. Now, if the member wants to reject that, he needs to go back and apologise to the New Zealand pensioners that had their entire pension for the period of time that they were in office based off that. Now, Mr Speaker, if one looks at
Point of order, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, I'm asking the Prime Minister if figures produced by one of his departments are accurate or not. I haven't heard an answer to that question.
Order. The Prime Minister is actually explaining that not often the House actually gets a detailed answer of some quality. The Prime Minister is actually... Order. Unless some member wants to leave this House, they will desist immediately. And I say to the Honourable Shadow Leader of the House, his interjections have been inept today. The member asked a question about a couple of statistics. The Prime Minister was explaining why he believed those statistics were not accurate measurements of what he believes the member was asking about. And I say to the House, when I'm on my feet, if someone wants to leave, they will very soon. Very soon. And I believe that the House ought to value answers where there was no attempt to attack the questioner. The Prime Minister was simply giving valuable information to the House. And I think that is something that should be valued. Now, I think the Prime Minister has gone on, the answer has been longish, and I think we should go on perhaps now to the next supplementary question. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Speaker, I'd like to invite you to review the tape of the comment that you just made, to think about whether it is your role to comment both positively about the government and negatively.
Order.
Sir, no
Order.
Westminster
the member will
democracy
resume his
does that.
seat right now. And the member may review the tapes as well to see how inept his interjections have been today. I should have stopped him earlier because other members of the House asked questions, they deserved to hear answers, and that member was actually making it very difficult for them to hear the answers to the questions they'd asked, and they have a right to hear those answers. And I've heard sufficient. There'll be further supplementary questions. Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
I think, with respect, sir, that Mr Mallard's point is that, and I don't impute any improper motive to the Speaker, but to editorialise whether an answer is valuable or not for the House is not the role of the Speaker.
Order. Now, I have to do this every day as members, normally opposition members, seek my assistance to get answers from ministers or to stop ministers from abusing the questions asked. Every day I have to make judgments about the question asked and the answers given. And the House has actually benefited enormously from most of those judgments. I don't pretend I get them all right. But yesterday the member may recollect one of his own questions. I stopped the Minister of Finance because I believe the Minister of Finance was not fairly answering a very fair question asked. And I listened very carefully. I was listening very carefully to the answer, and I've stopped the Prime Minister had he sought to play politics with the question. He gave what he believed was a genuine answer to the question. And as Speaker, as I say, I support attempts to give genuine answers to questions. I cannot support members if they wish to turn questions into political games. I can't support them in getting political answers, but genuine answers I can. Point of order, the Honourable Rick Barker.
Mr Speaker, I realise this is a difficult area and I don't want to be challenging you as the chair of this meeting or your authority. But I do want to raise a point which was referred to by the Honourable Trevor Mallard, and that was the reference you made to his interjections. I've sat here and I've listened, and I can concur with you in this, that a number of the interjections he made, you could have, with good grounds, challenged and hauled him to account immediately at the time. And I would have supported you 100% in that. But for the interest of the flow of the House, you let them go. And I thought that was your call. But the point I'd make to you, Mr Speaker, is that once you have decided to let the matter go, then I don't think it's appropriate for you to come back and make reference to it again later. The decision's made, you let it go. It's a little bit like the ref on the football field. If there's a penalty and you haven't blown the whistle, well then you can't come back sometime later and blow the whistle and say, well look, I'm sorry, I should have penalised you back here. I think your role is to ping him at the time, but if you don't, then I think he's got a free run at that point. And that's my point, Mr Speaker, and I don't think it's right for you to then come back and make some other comments about it. So I think when you made your judgment, you've let it go, that's the end of it. I think that's the point that Mr Mallard was making about the review of the tape, and I just want you to think about that again.
I accept the member's point is made in good faith. The dilemma I have as Speaker is that were I to intervene all the time, I would disrupt the House too much, and yet if I let it go totally, it can get into an unfair situation, and that's why at times I do. Today I thought the provocation, though, was pretty extreme, otherwise I would have mentioned it. Dr Russell Norman has a point of order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. I actually thought you were playing the advantage rule for the Prime Minister there, but On the question, you said that during the answer the Prime Minister wasn't attacking